haunted house. I used to live in a house where a woman died from electrocution in 1993. It was actually my stepsister's mom who died in a real bad way. I grew up listening to that story, along with the goodness of my mom taking care of my sister and how she looked after her like her own baby, blah, blah, blah. My dad usually comes late after work, so two boys from the neighborhood used to come to my house to sit with my mom and help her in the kitchen. As usual, they came over and started playing cards with my mom and sister. After a few hours, the lights were gone, and it was about 9 at night. Even though they knew about the story of my house, my mom had mentioned to me that they had never shown any signs of fear in their faces or how they act. As a light rushed to the kitchen and started searching for them near the window and the electric heater, suddenly, like someone was holding onto his hand too tightly, he felt it, and he just shook it off and ran to my mom and said something there in the kitchen. They all got terrified to say the fact that whoever in that house currently were sitting together waiting for the candle in the hallway. I know the fact that I'm living in a house where a person died a very unnatural death. I used to have nightmares in which I used to see my mom being killed or dead as she's being separated from me. I almost wake up every day in the middle of the night crying and goes to my parents' room to sleep. I even used to wet the bed apparently. This goes on and on. One Saturday morning, my parents along with my youngest brother decided to go shopping after my sister left for school. So I was all alone in that house in my room doing my homework. I heard someone. For the first few minutes, I didn't give much attention, as I know that if I give much attention, I will be dead on the spot, being scared and having a panic attack. Next time when I had that feeling, I opened the door of my room and checked directly to the kitchen to make sure if someone was there or not. Oh dear God! What I saw in the spookiest thing I would ever seen or have experienced in my entire life. I saw a woman's shadow walking from the kitchen to the work area, which is behind the kitchen. I got chills all over my body and felt like I was glued to my seat. Even though I felt like running away from my house, I suddenly got up from the chair and grabbed my badminton racket from the basket, took it out of the house, took the key from the hanger, and stepped out of the house. I locked myself outside the house and waited in the front area beside the garden for my parents to return from shopping. I said this to my mom, and she said, "It's okay." And she asked me to pray whenever I have such feelings ever again. Then we moved from that place to another one after a few years.
You are listening to the content of ParanormalIm.com.
Haunted neighborhood. This happened 10 years back when I was in middle school. I had lots of friends of my age from different schools, and on the weekends, I used to wait for all of them to return from school to go for a walk in the woods until 4 in the evening. There were also times when we all would wait for me to return from my extra classes. Our neighborhood gets dark easily once it hits 6 o'clock, so all of our moms have this strict rule to come home by 6. So totally, we have 2 hours with us. Most of my friends, first of all, talk about some random things like their plans for the next weekend and about the girls they like. I am so gay, so I did not find any talks about girls very interesting. Moreover, I felt offended. After all these general talks, we'd go for ghost hunting in the nearby abandoned houses and huts. It gets really spooky when all these crickets start making noises. Normally, I'm the one who gives everybody the strength to walk further. One day, we were all walking along the roadside near the canal. We saw an old woman washing her clothes. On a normal day, 5:30 in the evening, we've never seen any aged people walking or doing something like in a place like this. We've been doing this for months, so we all know the routes and the nature of the roadways and the woods. The fact that we have not completely explored the place still makes us a little bit annoyed because we really wanted to finish watching everything that surrounded the woods. The woman didn't acknowledge our presence. She continued what she was doing. One of my friends picked up a stone from the sidewalk and threw it into the canal where she was washing her clothes. It was totally unexpected. We didn't even notice him picking up the stone. God damn! This woman just turned around with a stupid, ugly face that I thought my heart just came out of my chest. For a moment, I could not even believe what I saw, and I couldn't breathe either. I just grabbed one of the hands of my friends and yelled at the rest of them to run as fast and as much as they could. Most of us looked back to see if she was following us, but we could never see her as she was not there in the first place. We reached my house, went to my room upstairs, drank plenty of water until we were okay. We just looked into everyone's eyes and decided never to talk about it. It happened that literally all of us had nightmares throughout the next week that could relate to the face we saw. We never visited the woods again. Most of them in the college graduates now. When we remember this incident, we have this question in our minds about whether to believe it or to consider it a mere active imagination. But we all didn't imagine the same. Still gives us the chills.
You are listening to the content of ParanormalIm.com.
I've never had any unexplainable things happen in my house, but this was terrifying. I sleep in the basement of a one-story house out in the country. Never seen or heard anything unexplainable until out of nowhere weird noises could be heard outside our house. About 3 years ago now, the first noises were heard by both me and my mom. We had to let the dog out around 12 at night. We're letting him back in, talking, when we heard a sound that no animal could make. It sounded like a large cat that had its throat slit. It was like a gargling meow. We both immediately started talking and looking outside to see if there was anything just outside, because that's where it sounded like it was coming from. Just beyond where our house's lights could reach, but we saw nothing. It was like something just letting you know it's there, then not doing anything or making another sound. The next incident happened a couple months after, when I was sleeping outside my room. Since I didn't have a bed at the time and the futon couldn't fit through my hallway door, it was late at night. I was watching TV and I heard what I sounded like someone moving around just outside my laundry room. The layout of my basement is pretty open, so from where I was laying, I could see almost everything in the basement except the laundry room and another open area at the bottom of the stairs. So I thought someone might have come down to get something from the fridge or freezer, so I just went back to watching TV. A couple seconds later, I heard someone walking around barefoot, and since the floor is concrete, you can hear it pretty clearly, so I sat up and thought someone was going to turn the corner. But then the walking turned into a full sprint, and that's when it happened. I watched as the footsteps ran past in front of me, but no one was there. They disappeared into the unfinished bathroom and stopped instantly. And when I say instantly, I mean no slow down in the footsteps, just an abrupt stop. My dog is used to sleep in that bathroom, but after that, he wouldn't even come downstairs. Then I had my first and last sleep paralysis episode, where I heard the same footsteps before a pitch-black person on all fours crawled at me and got right in my face before disappearing under the futon. The final incident happened probably 3 or 4 months later, when I was finally back in my room. I was laying in bed when I heard those footsteps again, but it sounded like they were running, aimlessly. After a good minute of this, they stopped in front of my door and it went quiet, but only for a few seconds before my doorknob began to jiggle back and forth. I've never had that sense of dread ever in my life, and I've never been so scared. I ran to my door, grabbed the knob, and sat with my back up against the door and my feet pushed against the walls opposite. I even looked under the door and there was nothing there. I probably sat there for 30 minutes before I got the courage to move. And through those 30 minutes, I kept looking under the door. I slept with a steel bar that night. Since then, nothing major's happened, but sometimes when I come back into my room and close the door, I'll turn around and the door will be open again.
You are listening to the content of ParanormalIm.com.
I've been haunted since before I was even born. This all begins long before I even existed, when we still lived in LA. And number one was roughly 5 years old. Back then, my dad worked nights at a hotel. He had a curly afro, and I had to wear a suit. You need to know this for later. Number one, I was staying up late on the bottom bunk. Number two was fast asleep on the top. My parents' bedroom was further down the hall. The kids' room was closer to the entrance, where my mom was also sleeping. Suddenly, number one looks at the door to see the silhouette of a little girl standing there. She knows number two is asleep on the top bunk. She can't even still hear shuffling and breathing. Before she can even process, the girl walks into the room paralyzed with fear. Number one can't move and decided to put her blanket over her head. She stays there shaking for a while when she finally takes it off. There's nobody in the room, just her. Number two sleeping above her, nothing has ever even been touched. At this point, number one is terrified, but she then sees our dad walk up to the door. She can only make out the silhouette, but she knows it's him, from the curly fro and that suit. She starts calling out for him, begging him to come in because she's scared. She just stands there, ignoring her. He steps into the room and starts looking around like he's looking for something, still ignoring number one as she's screaming for him. He stops as if he's realized it's not there, then walked down the hallway towards her parents' bedroom. Number one has a terrible feeling, so she just laid there terrified and eventually drifted off to sleep. The next morning, when she sees her dad, she asks him why she ignored her last night. He asked, "What is she talking about?" And she explains what happened. Our dad instantly starts screaming at her mom, accusing her of cheating because she was out at a hotel all night. Mom didn't cheat. No one was over there. No one was ever there. They didn't mention it again for years. Another pre-me number 6 story. About 4 years after that, number 4 and some cousins were playing outside. Our other cousin, we'll just call her X, was a toddler at the time, blonde, and often had her hair in pigtails. X came outside and insisted they play with her, so they decided to play tag and have her be it. They wound up getting chased in circles around a truck by her for a while. When number 4, at the end of the line, noticed she couldn't hear her anymore, number 4 turns around to see where X is gone. Now scared that she's lost and they'll get in trouble, they all start searching for her everywhere. One of the cousins looked inside the truck, and there in the glass, they see a blonde girl with pigtails staring back at them, but her eyes are black and her face is cracked all over like broken porcelain doll. They all see this and start screaming and running towards the house. They try to explain what happened to the parents when they see X walking down the stairs, having just woken up from her nap. They ask her where she went and how she got upstairs so fast, but the parents told them that she's just been asleep the whole time. 8 years later, when I was 3 years old, we moved to Georgia to a 4-bedroom house that was just built. Nobody had ever lived there before us. It was brand spanking new. I was a very odd kid. Imagine like a baby Wednesday Addams. I would often do things like speak in tongues, talk to things that didn't exist, and sleep for long periods of time. We're talking like 12-plus-hour naps. Most interestingly, I used to insist on playing hide-and-go-seek, and I was so good in fact, that sometimes I would be hiding for days on end, and it happened so often nobody even reported me missing. When they'd find me, I'd be hiding in things like closets buried under clothes and such, meaning when I'd do this, I would go days being completely silent, never leaving to even use the bathroom. I don't have any details of these games because I have no memory of ever doing them in the first place. I've just been told about it by my parents and older siblings. However, I do remember the first time I saw her. It was my first day at this new elementary school, and during lunch I sat alone since I didn't yet know anybody. I was staring out through the windows when I saw this little girl outside of them. She looked about my age, 7-ish, had a light pink dress, and no shoes or socks, etc. Her hair was light blonde, and she was really, really pale, except for her eyes. Her eyes were black, and the skin around them was dark. It looked bruised. I stared as she raised her hand and started tapping on the window, staring directly at me. She keeps tapping, and a crack forms under her finger. She keeps tapping, and the window cracking more and more. When it looked like the whole window was about to break, I turned around to see if anyone else was seeing this. Nobody was reacting or even looking that way, and when I turned back, I saw that she was gone. The cracks are almost completely gone, except for the one directly under where her finger was. There, I can still see the first crack, and I watch as it disappears. After that, I saw her everywhere. In every window, mirror, or reflection I passed, she was always there without fail. Not long later, I started really seeing her in the flesh. She'd be with me at school, church, home. I had learned about imaginary friends, and I figured that that was what she was, so I never really mentioned it until 4th grade, when I had made a real-life best friend, and I decided I wanted to tell her about this girl. At the time, we were doing the batteries and bulb experiment, so we had boxes of large batteries and stuff piled up in the center of our table. They were so heavy that they never moved, not even when the bunch of excited 4th graders would run up and hit the tables. I sat my best friend down and began telling her the window story, but as soon as I mentioned the girl, boxes came flying across the table and hit my best friend in the face. Nobody pushed them, they just flew. At that moment, I realized that it probably wasn't safe to share, so I continued to keep it to myself. After that day, I didn't see her often anymore, but I could still feel her. Not feel her like if someone was touching me. It was a feeling I'd get every time I saw her, like something was off. My body felt shaky and uneasy. When I started seeing her less, I started feeling her more. I started experiencing sleep paralysis and nightmares every night, varying the levels of fear factor. When I woke up, I was always covered in scratches and bruises. I even woke up with blinds strung around my neck multiple times. Once I dreamed of getting choked and woke up with a handprint around my neck, which I took a picture of. I would wake up with pictures of me sleeping that were impossible for me to take. One time I decided to take a video while I was sleeping so I could see if I was doing it all to myself. In this video, I sit up, smile at the camera, and turn it off. I have no memory of doing that, and I looked so insane it scared me too much to watch again. I shared a room with number 5 and number 7, and they could talk for hours about things I would say in my sleep. I could have entire conversations with you, walk up and down the stairs, and even run faster than I could awake. I even spoke fluently in languages I do not speak. No matter what I was doing, I never remembered it after. The master bedroom of the house had 2 miniature closets. At one end of the room, inside both looked almost like an attic. Unfinished walls with exposed nails. No insulation, no paint, nothing. There was a tiny space between the walls that connected the two. They used the right closet to hold the old Halloween costumes, VHSs, toys. They used the left to hold important files and documents. It was always locked. One day, number 7 thought it was funny to lock me inside the right closet while I was looking for something. While I was trapped, I looked above the door for the first time. There, carved into the wood, were all of my siblings. There, carved into the wood, were all of my siblings and I's names, spelled incorrectly and unfinished. It even had some of my favorite cousins and best friends' names, all of which regularly slept over. The writing was scribble, almost childlike. The only name that I didn't recognize was written directly in the middle, spelled perfectly and complete. Evelyn. I knew immediately who wrote this. It was her. I was so focused reading that I stopped struggling to get out. So number 7 opened the door. She saw me staring and I made her come back and look. Make sure I wasn't imagining it. She saw it too. It was there. That was the day I learned her name.
You are listening to the content of Paranormal.com.
Ask Reddit 1. Cryptid. Big footprints found in snow, late 2017. Creatures seen in woods, February 2018. March 2018, April 2018, August 2018, December 2018. Other May 2018, December 2018, February 2019, January 2020, June 2020. Details. At least 6 feet. Brown, black hair, fur, bipedal, humanoid. Friends and I have both seen tall humanoid figures covered in hair and fur walking through the forest, smelled awful things. 2, unknown date 18. I saw 6 to 7 feet light brown furred humanoids crossing the river. Around 3:30 p.m., 3/17/18. It seemed multiple Sasquatches were closing in on us, but left around 3:20 p.m., 3/18/18. It seemed multiple Sasquatches were closing in on us, but again left food sources: deer, turkeys, coons, squirrels, oysters, rabbits, beavers, otters, etc. 3/24/18. Friend sighted crouching black-furred figure, possibly upwards of 11 and a half feet tall, relative to my height, I guess. Roughly 5'6" crouching, according to my friend. 3/24/18. Friend sighted black-furred figure hiding behind tree observing us. Would be about 5'8". 3/25/18. I sighted a black figure running on the other side of the river. 4/3/18. We sighted black walking figures. 4/4/18. Unknown humanoid, and I had to stare down for about a minute. 4/26/18. We observed a black furred humanoid in the brush. 5/6/18. I found what appeared to be a non-human and non-bear track. 5/26/18. We saw and heard a tree fall over. Beforehand, friend heard a wood knock after I heard movement and a faint noise. 8/17/18. Friend saw a bipedal light brown creature walking. 18/18/18. I got a rock thrown at me. 8/21/18. I got a rock thrown at me. 12/11/18. I heard movement on both sides of the river, wood snapping on the other side. I briefly communicated with Sasquatch on the other side. 12/22. I saw a bipedal black figure dashing incredibly fast, probably on the other side. Christmas 2018. I heard at least 2 wood knocks, multiple noises that might be Sasquatch. Heard a weird vocalization. 2/2/19. I heard several noises that could be Sasquatch. Movement plus knocks. Might have heard roots being ripped up. 1/23/20. I heard weird vocalizations. Initially thought it was a small group of coyotes, but I heard it again leaving, and it sounded big, bigger than a deer. 6/15/20. I heard big movements that sounded significantly larger than a deer. Could be wrong. Felt like maybe I was being watched.
You are listening to the content of Paranormal.com.
Ask Reddit 2. I've seen Sasquatch. Before anyone asks, it was in Rhode Island. I didn't seriously believe in Sasquatch before I saw one. When I was a kid, I'd read about Bigfoot and think how cool it would be, but I never really bought into it. I was walking in the woods in February 2018 and I saw some big bipedal creature walking through the river. I'd say it was between 6 and 7 feet tall, so I split the difference, and we'll say 6'6". I stopped to stare, so I didn't take my phone out to record. Even if I did, my camera quality is absolute dog shit. Let me stress this. It was not a bear. Its arms swung when it walked. The gait was practically identical to the Patterson-Gimlin footage. Since then, I've gone into the woods hundreds of times, with others and alone. One of my friends believes he's also seen Sasquatch in those woods. I think there are at least 3 of them. In all the time I've spent in those woods, I've never had a sighting as clear as the first one. I've had a few quick glances here and there, but I haven't had a good luck. If anyone's interested, I have a document recording, sightings, and other incidents. I know it's hard to believe, and it's even harder to believe being in Rhode Island, but I swear I wholeheartedly believe that there is a humanoid being running around in the area. They're mostly peaceful. I think there are many species like Sasquatch spread worldwide. There's the Yeti, the Yowie, the Yeren, the Almas, etc. I firmly believe they're out there. I will say I don't believe in the typical Yeti. I'm 90% sure about the abominable snowman is just a misidentified animal. I think I remember Yeti being explained as the extinct bear species.
You are listening to the content of Paranormal.com.
Ask Reddit 3. When I chose my dorm building, I knew the place used to be a funeral home, but didn't think too much of it. In my sophomore years of college, my social group was in turmoil, and I was dealing with some familial issues to boot. Sleep was not something I valued yet, and I took up to walking to the local very old graveyard at night. The quiet was nice, and I was avoiding a roommate who was involved in the turmoil. I had top bunk, she had the bottom, and our heads lay away from the desk door area as we slept at night. On her desk was a lamp that turned on by touch. I'd come home, walk by, but not touch the lamp, and go to change into my night clothes at the opposite end of the room. Every night the lamp would turn on. At first, I assumed the roommate was turning her light on. Eventually, it occurred to me that it might be something following me home from the graveyard. Eventually, I stopped wandering and the light stopped turning on at night. I'm not sure if I turned it off as I climbed into bed every night. I don't like the dark, so I probably let it stay on, but the roommate never complained. Come senior year, I moved into my own room on the top floor of that same dorm building. For the first half of the year, all was well. Then I returned to the campus after winter break, and my room started to scare me. At first, it was little things. There was no airflow, yet paintings I'd hung would suddenly fall off the wall. Fine. Thumbtacks weren't the most secure option for securing art to a wall. This happened so frequently that I stopped putting them back up. Then one night, I awoke to the sound of shattering glass in my dorm room. I turned on the light and looked around. My room had a mirror over the sink, a small sealed window, and a box of shot glasses I was using for a design assignment. That's the extent of the glassware in my possession at that time. I scanned them all, and none appeared broken. My shot glasses sat on the top of the closet. The mirror and the window were intact and in place. I turned off the light and went back to sleep. Come morning, I checked the second time before leaving for the day. The shot glasses remained on the top of the closet. I went to class. Later, I returned to my room to find the glasses placed in the center of the floor. The door had been locked all day. I started sleeping with the lights on, calling my boyfriend every night before bed because I was afraid of my room. By this point, I was convinced the room was haunted. But so far, the ghost hadn't done much beyond annoying me out of my sleep. That changed when I awoke to a crash in the middle of the night. I slept on a lofted bed, and I would put my hand-me-down laptop underneath it at night. Instantly alert, I turned on the light. My laptop lay shut in the center of the room on the floor. A piece of plastic from the inside of the laptop lay beside it. My laptop was broken. I was pissed. Not scared anymore, just very done with the whole situation. Couldn't afford another laptop, and that one had the expensive Adobe suite on it. The next day, I taped a piece of paper to the top of my dresser and placed a small golf pencil beside it. Then I told the entity in my room that it was not to communicate with me anymore, unless it was by writing whatever its message was with that pencil on that piece of paper, which means ever again I would have it exercised. I was very clear that I would call upon a priest, nun, actual exorcist, witch, whatever the heck, I did not care. Whoever I had to call until it was gone from that place forever. Nothing else weird happened during the next couple months that I lived in that room. After graduating, I learned that the president of my college gives an annual lecture regarding the campus hauntings. Art students being separated from the general student body by physical proximity, our workspace being that far from the main campus, and our schedules being that much fuller from the average student, not counting the music majors, we weren't invited. Apparently that dorm building is known to be haunted by a little girl who died in a fire, so I assumed that's who I was threatening after they broke my laptop.
You are listening to the content of ParanormalIm.com.
Ask Reddit 4. I used to babysit my younger siblings. There are a total of 7 of us, and my parents clung to the free labor ideals of raising kids, and I'm the oldest. When watching my second to youngest brother, Jay, at the time he was 3, he started asking me about the man who lived in our front yard. I freaked out. We lived on a busy road across from a military junkyard, so we frequently would have homeless people pop by looking for food or help. I asked him about it, and he started telling me a story about how an old man would come at night sometimes to show him his cats. At that point, I thought he was just making stuff up. While we had some transients, our house was very secure, and I knew nobody could get in at night. As the days passed, I continued to ask him about the man and talked excitedly about him. A man about my height, 6 feet, who wore a big coat and always had cats for him to pet. Creepy, but kids imagine a lot of stuff. One day, he runs out to me while I'm cooking lunch. "The cat man is back, but he's being weird." I rush to his room, and he hides by the door. There's nothing. There's a look of pure confusion on my little brother's face when I ask him to explain. "He was just here," he says. But he was being really scary. He looked sick, and he wouldn't let the cats come out of his coat. He could see them crawling under his coat and crying and meowing, but he wouldn't let them out, like he usually did. I comforted my brother, and for a while, he didn't play alone in his room. Most nights, he just slept in bed with my parents. From then on, and he didn't really mention it again. Fast forward 4 years, and I have another little brother, 3 years old again, who's now the occupant of the nursery, Jay's old room. One day, I'm watching W. Jay was at his friend's for a sleepover. W comes out of the living room where I was reading a book and looks me dead in the eyes and says, "Big brother, who's the cat man?" I froze. "Who?" I asked. "The cat man." he replied, handing me a picture he drew of what looked like a man in a trench coat holding an orange cat. He's 3, not much details. I asked him why he was talking to strangers, and he says, his kitties are really cute, and he says he knows you. We noped the fuck out of the house that day and spent the afternoon at McDonald's and the play place.
You are listening to the content of ParanormalIm.com.
Ask Reddit 5. I grew up with a pioneer cemetery right next to my neighborhood. Surprisingly, it wasn't much of an attraction to the majority of kids in the hood for many years. It happened to be in the middle of my house and my childhood best friend, grandmother's house. We would often meet there and were so intrigued with the few small gated sections that held the bodies of very young children who passed between the 18 and early 1900s. Many of the graves still had physical mementos laying outside of them. The most fascinating was a pair of white children's small prairie boots. We would talk to them and often just say hello. It was kind of our weird spiritual thing we just did but never really discussed it or told others about it. Before we were about to be in middle school, the cemetery became a hotspot for delinquent locals to vandalize to the point of bones being dug up and any memento, like the white boots, were stolen. A local group band together and over a few-year period slowly rebuilt and flagged completely demolished gravestones and burial sites, and it appears the cemetery has been relatively respected and intact since then. Flash forward almost 20 years, and I live back in my hometown with my 11-year-old daughter, and have driven by the cemetery for years, but have not stopped. We are going quarantine crazy, so I decided to take her to the cemetery for a little history, spiritual and etiquette lesson for respecting the sacredness of where our bodies get laid to rest. We enter the cemetery and make our way up to the small gated section with a few children's graves. I tell my daughter how it used to be my favorite area to visit and say hello. We stand there reading the names and ages of the 3 children, and the daughter's half-serious, half-joking asks me, "Do you think we can go inside the gate? I bet they are ready to play." Just as I started to tell her, no, we want to respect and try not to walk on where the bodies were laid to rest. The gate, which was completely shut and latched, and it was shockingly 0 wind day in a town that often gets 80-mile-an-hour wind during the summer, swings completely open. My daughter and I were clearly a little spooked, but I tried to rationalize this event and we kept on moving through the cemetery. About 3 minutes later, my daughter shouts, "Oh my gosh, there's a baby deer laying at that infant's grave." It was literally 10 feet from us. It stood up and never shifted focus. The rest of the time we walked around the cemetery. It walked about 15 feet away, but right alongside of us. I started to get a little mama bear nervous, so I decided that we would wrap up the tour. We followed the same path we took up, down because there were a lot of areas with just flags to mark where people were laid to rest. The deer continued to follow, and as we passed the gated section that had flown open earlier, I decided to test and see how that logically could have happened. That gate was wrought iron, rock solid, and completely intact. Even me, swinging it with full force, did not open it as wide as it had flown open earlier. As I was doing this, the deer came up 5 feet of my daughter, and I just stood on the other side of the gate. It was one of the most beautiful and odd encounters I'd ever experienced. I'm pretty spiritually in tune. I often feel things, not see them, and to have my daughter with me during this experience was very special.
You are listening to the content of ParanormalIm.com.
I think I used to live in a haunted house. Growing up, I always had to move from one place to another. There was this apartment in particular that terrified me. I was about 7 or 8 when weird stuff started happening. Basically, things would go missing. Things would get moved. You'd hear footsteps in the hallways. Once my dad heard someone small running. He thought it was my sister and called her, but no one answered. When he came to check on me and my sister, he found both of us fast asleep, and we had always shared a room. One time, my mom baked a cake at night. I don't know why she decided to bake at night, but she did. At night, we heard muffled chewing sounds. It wasn't my parents. They had gone to sleep hours before that. Their room was in front of mine, and I would have seen them coming out. The next day, we found half of the cake gone. Another time, my dad bought a GPS. He was very happy with it and put it on the table. The next day, it was gone. Me and my sister didn't touch it because my dad was very strict and we used to be scared of what would happen if we touched it. My mom was home all day, but she's a busy woman and couldn't care less about a GPS. It was gone for a week. Then one day my dad called my mom asking her where she found the GPS, and it was right where he had left it. This freaks me out the most. I had a saint, a paper with a saint on it. We call it a saint here. No matter how many times I get rid of the saint, it always comes back. I ripped it apart so many times, I shredded it, and it always returns to my desk. I no longer live in that house, but every time I walk by it, I get this feeling of dread.
You are listening to the content of ParanormalM.com.
I'm starting to believe since working in a museum's collections department. Howdy, board. As with many, I've always been into the paranormal, but never really believed in any of it. I've sought out ways of experiencing paranormal things, but any time I've had something, I've had a way of dismissing it and could chalk it up to just a weird occurrence. After a year ago, though, I switched roles in the museum I work at. I've been here for about 5 years, and some weird things have happened. But again, you can rule out most of the weird coincidences. But when I moved into the collections department, we're the people who take care of the objects and artifacts in the museum's possession and on loans. Things got weird, really fast. Everyone talks about museums being haunted, and it's understandable. We house and care for lots of really old, sometimes creepy objects, and many of them have storied pasts, and collections are roughly 200,000 pieces, and we have some doozies. To make it short, I've been seeing shadows, hearing my name, and having lights turn on and off when I'm alone. Our storage is split into 3 areas. The upstairs mezzanine is home to our toy and puppet collections. Downstairs has 3 connected areas split in 2 rooms, textiles by itself, and American materials and ethnographic world objects in the main area. And the 3rd area is in a separate part of the museum, split into 2 itself, and houses larger objects and natural sciences. The most convincing evidence I've experienced for the existence of paranormal activity happened about a month ago, and it's really stuck with me. To set the scene, I was in our textiles room, lower level storage, in a room off the main area with the world objects. Returning some clothing we had shown on tour. To briefly explain the storage setup, you come down the stairs and you can go left into the world objects or right and take a turn into American materials. However, the stairs are the only thing separating the areas, so the stairwell is more like a donut hole than anything. Turning left into world objects and immediately taking another left will let you walk perpendicular to the aisles of world objects and brings you to the right side of the American materials. On that right wall, looking into the American materials, is the door into textiles. It's normal practice like this with most places to only have lights on in an area where you were working. So I had lights on at the base of the stairwell, the very front of the world objects. And that illuminated enough of my path into the textiles room. Up until now, I had lights turned off. Doors slam, heard my name, and had objects move. Basically things, but stuff I could ignore, look past, or maybe explain away. I went down the stairs into the area and was immediately overcome with panic and anxiety. The room was cold, and there was just bad energy. I turned around, sat in my office for a couple minutes thinking I was just having a panic attack and cooling off, and decided to just ignore it. I went back down, hit the lights, beelined it to the textiles room, and started putting things back into place. I felt like I was being watched the entire time I walked through the lower level, but I didn't think about it and figured it was just paranoia, but I couldn't shake this gut feeling. Then I left the room, and that's when it got bad. I opened the door, and I can see all the way across American materials. The last shelving unit on the far wall from me is where we keep items from a famously deceased child. The family donated all of their belongings after their passing. There weren't any lights on in that area, but I could see someone. It looked like a fully grown man, probably around 6 feet tall, and the shape was hulking. But they were darker than dark. They were darker than the shadows of the room. I'm telling you guys, with my oath on whatever you want, that I could see this person was darker than an unlit wall, and it sprinted. I mean absolutely fast, as fast as I've ever seen anyone run into the closest wall. Not at me, not to scare me, but sprinted to it, right, which was only about 10 feet away from it into a cement wall. This all took place in about 5 seconds, and I just ignored it. I just quick walked out of the storage, flipped the lights, and hauled it up the stairs. I got about halfway up when the hairs on the back of my neck stood straight up, and I heard someone say my name, and the doorknob at the base of the stairs started to turn. I didn't even stop to listen. I'm sure there's a way of explaining it. Again, I very much could have just had a panic attack and the anxiety went away just about as soon as I walked back up the stairs the first time. Since then, things have gotten stranger with objects moving in front of me and other people in the department or doors closing in front of us. Like I said, things have happened since I've been here, and there are plenty of stories of before I was in the apartment or at the museum. But this thing, a month ago, was just different. I'm only writing this now because last night I had a dream where a ghost or something was holding my mouth closed and pushing on my back. And when I woke up, it was happening too. I feel like things are just getting weirder and weirder with me, and I've been looking into shadow people or other sorts of weird apparitions. I doubt this gets much traction, but if anyone wants to chip in on the ideas as to what this might be, or how to explain it, I'd love to hear any of your thoughts.
You are listening to the content of Paranormal.com.
I met a ghost and didn't even know it, and I can't tell anyone about it. So around 11 years ago, I was a telecoms engineer. The normal day went to a few residential houses, either fitted or fixed phone lines. Everything was no different from any other day, but then I downloaded my next job. I got a 20-line installation. Now this is not the norm for the role I had, as these tasks usually went to other teams. No issues. I thought it would be nice to be somewhere for longer than an hour or two, then here, there, everywhere. I called the contact. It's a contact center who tells me that either the caretaker or manager of the building is aware and will explain what is required. So I arrived. And it's a really old building, built in the 1920s, I later found out. I make my way in tester and tool bags, as is the norm. And after speaking with the receptionist, I discovered that the building was at one point a nursing home, and after being derelict for a few years, it's now being used as offices for various businesses. As promised, 2 managers arrive, tell me that they think what I'm looking for is in the cellar, as there's a lot of cables down there, and that's all they know. So I asked if the caretaker is about, as they usually know these types of things. I was told he wasn't, as he was ill, but due back the next day. I follow this man and woman to a number padlocked door. They open it up, tell me code, and on the other side of the door is a stairwell that just leads down to the cellar. So as we get down there, the light is poor, like really poor. I have no chance of working like this. I mean, there were lights, yes, but you're talking dependent lights that weren't great. Understanding this, the woman tells me that they have hanging lights, so no issues. I go back to the van, grab an extension, and head toward the cellar. So as I'm passing the receptionist, she just asked, "Are you going to be in the cellar on your own?" So I just replied, "Yeah, sometimes you have to. But if what I'm looking for isn't there, I won't be for long." She laughed, but told me, "Rather you than me. Nobody likes it going down there, even for storage space." Now I'll be honest, I just thought people don't like stairs to a dark place. No worries, but not something I'm unfamiliar with. So it just needs to get done. After a quick look around with the make manager, we find a socket. I sort the lights and yep, there is the DP I'm looking for, but it's an old solder block, no good for broadband. So I let him know that this is going to take a bit longer, and this is even before knowing there are 20 more lines to go. He just agrees and shows me where the office fitters have left the cables for the clients, which to my relief, if in the cupboard behind the receptionist. So all set knowing what I know, I crack on. So I'm testing all the lines, and it's going, well, I've gone more than half to the cabinet, and maybe a few shy. But I know the area, and know from there I can get them through, as it's got 200 pair cables that run through it. At this point, it's around 4 o'clock. I don't have the blocks I need on the van, so I tag up the cables and turn off all the lights on my way out before closing and locking the door. I sign out and tell the girl at the desk I'll see her tomorrow and leave. On my way home, I call my manager and tell them the script and that I may need a hand for half a day or more, as I'm not even sure anything has been done in the exchange. The next day, 8 a.m., I get a call from one of the other lads who tells me he is with me all day, and that's all he knows. We sort out a roll. Each I'll push the pairs from the box to the cab. You do the cab in exchange if needed, and then it's just a case of fitting the box and running a large internal cable from the box to behind the receptionist. I make my way into the building once again, open the door with the code, and to my surprise, all the lights are on. Now I'm 100% sore. I turn them off. So I'm guessing one of the managers may have come to check if I was still there and left them on by mistake. I go down and do what I need to do and leave to push through the cables outside, call my mate, and he's getting them one by one, so it's going well. I finish up and head back to fit the block. So I grab the blocks, drill all the bits, set marks for pilot holes, and just hear, "What are you doing?" After nearly jumping out of my skin, I turn and see this man with gray overalls on. So I say, "I'm just doing what's been asked. Are you the caretaker?" He replies that he says that nobody has been down here for years and surprised that I'm there. So I just cracked on, done and drilling, And then as soon as I'd stopped with the drill and it was quieter, this guy just started chatting away. "What football team do you support? Do you mind if I watch what you're doing?" I told him no worries and just tried to be as polite as I could. He then told me that his name was Gordon and he had been working there for over 30 years. A bit confused, recalling what the receptionist had said, I told him I was under the impression that this place had been empty for a few years, and looking at the cabling, it's not been updated for at least 15 or 20. He just said that the things are always happening here. After about an hour, back and forth, while I'm working, I hear a hello from the top of the stairwell. Expecting Gordon to answer, I didn't. Then it came again, so I turned around. Gordon is gone now. I'm thinking, I've been waffling for 10 minutes and he's not even here. I pop up and it's one of the managers asking if I'm expecting somebody, another engineer. So I apologize again. The phone signal isn't very good down there, so he probably hasn't been able to get a hold of me. All cleared. He comes down. We chat for 5. He tells me that he'll start at the receptionist end and work with me while I finish. A quick toilet break, and I go back down. I'm in the final stages now. I'm just putting phone numbers to pairs. As for when my mates get there, we connect the test and go. As I'm doing this, I hear, "Sorry about that." Again, out of nowhere, it's Gordon. So I just acknowledge it. Call him clever and make a joke that if they can't find you, they can't ask you to do anything. I continue for 5 minutes and I've done all I can. So I tell him I'm just heading up to assist my mate. We'll be done soon and be out of the way. Gordon then told me that he liked the company and it's been nice to talk. I felt saddened at this point, thinking he was maybe treated poorly by people in the building. So I just said, of course, mate costs nothing to be nice and have a chat. So I go up the stairs, leaving Gordon down there and help get the cable through a void into the cellar. 10 to 20 minutes of trying to fish it through and we've got it. We go down. Gordon is not around and we finish. My mates tell me it's time for food and he'll go to Chippy Ann's, meet me in the backyard as I tell him. I just need a few signatures and make sure that the lights go back so I get my extension lead. I get what I need from the manager's signatures and show him where the link is behind the reception. I inform him that I need to get my extension lead. So are the lights okay there for now? Or does he want me to move them as we go? There's good light. He states that they might as well stay on for now, and he'll find another lead in case somebody else or anybody else needs to go down there. I head down and start unplugging the lights, and Gordon appears again, telling me he didn't realize the lights were mine, as he wouldn't have touched them. Straight away I thought, so that's why they were on this morning. But then it dawned, the door. It was locked. I asked him if he had come down yesterday evening, and he said, yes, of course. I'm always here. It's where I'm needed. Confused and wanting to disappear, I said, no worries. Nice to meet you. I placed my hand and put to shake, and he just raised his hand and said, hope to see you soon. So I left, signed out, thought nothing of it. Then a week goes by and I get a call from our control asking if I can return to this address as one of the lines isn't working and it's high level. So I say, yep, no worries. I get there, say hello again to the receptionist. I asked if I could just check behind her first before having to go into the cellar. With some joy, it is there. It's just not a bit properly. As I'm sorting an older guy, he asks me if I was the one who was here last week. I said yes. He apologized and stated that he was the caretaker and had to take more days off than planned. I just told him, oh, don't worry about it. I'm sure Gordon will tell you where everything is. As soon as I said this, He just looked me dead in the eyes and said, "What did you just say?" So I said, "Gordon, he told me he's the caretaker here." This guy went white and just asked me if he could talk outside, so I followed. He simply asked me if I believed in ghosts, then told me that before this was what it is today. It was a nursing home, and the old caretaker was a man called Gordon. He knew this, as when the building was taken over, he found an old desk with to-do lists, letters, and requests for a Gordon, and there was a sign on the door which said caretaker, and where this desk was, that door led to the cellar. I immediately rubbished this and started laughing, thinking him and his mate were pulling my leg. He then asked me if he was wearing overalls, which I replied he was. He just looked me dead in the eyes and said, "Listen, mate, I'm not lying. Gordon passed away years ago, supposedly on the job. I just thought you should know, as it's not something that's considered funny, telling me he has been mocked as he has been seeing Gordon, but people just have never believed him. I never said a thing to anybody beyond that until one night fishing with a friend. And it's just like he said. He thought I was taking the piss. I know what I saw, and I know what I heard. I don't tell this to anybody as it's not worth the ridicule, hence why I'm using a throwaway account. Ghosts or spirits, they're real."
You are listening to the content of ParanormalM.com.
Object disturbed in locked bedroom while spouse and I were sleeping. Backstory is long, but it takes a lot to explain the whole situation and rule out some fairly obvious potential causes. My daughter gave my wife a granular wax candle kit for Christmas. You pour the granules in any appropriate container, put one of the supplied wicks down in the granules, and you have a candle. Optionally, add essential oils as a scent, and it just soaks into the granules. It was a very thoughtful gift. My wife loves it, and I've grown to like it too. Because of how it looks after the wick is melted, the granules as it burns and creates a well like any candle does. But having the rest of it still be those loose granules, I think is neat. Then when the wick is completely burned, you can lift the solidified wax out and either crush it, put it back in the mix, or get rid of it. So you'll only have the tiny granules next time. We set it up in a thick-walled, fairly large but short square glass on a shelf near a bedroom door. My wife goes to bed before me most nights and likes the candle lit. I blow it out when I come to bed, very gently, because I want to retain that look of the deep well of the granules as long as the wick will last. And I'm so careful to keep that look that I take pains to not disturb the granules next time I light it. We have a cat that is not allowed in the bedroom at night, or even if we can help it. Her litter box is in the basement, so we leave the door from down there to the main floor living space propped open. The basement has an exterior door and some windows, so someone could break in and would have no other locks between them and our main space, so I also put a doorknob bar in place against our bedroom door when I go to bed. Then at least someone would have to expend a fair amount of effort to make some noise to get in, rather than just jimmying one of those useless indoor locks. All this happened as normal last night. I gently blew out the candle, disturbing nothing except the flame, locked the doorknob, put the bar in place, and went to bed. This morning I found the candle completely stirred about. The solidified wax was partially crushed, granules piled up in random spots and in the corners of the glass, like someone just played around in it for a minute. None of the granules spilled, and the candle itself not moved. My wife admitted getting up to get a drink and take an Advil, but that is a common occurrence. she would have no reason to disturb the candle. She says she did not, and she relocked and rebarred the door. I do not remember getting up during the night, and I usually do not. We discussed sleepwalking, but neither of us have done it in decades that we know of. We have seen no evidence of any other animals, nothing else disturbed, nothing chewed up, no droppings, no noise sufficient to wake us. I'm pretty messed up by the fact that this is the only thing I can find being disturbed. And how much I enjoyed the look of the candle makes it feel like it was somehow personal, or at least a thing that I would maybe take more notice of. So obviously, a camera is going up. And we'll see what I get. Neither of us like the idea of a camera in the bedroom, but I'm not going to cloud connect it. And I intend to find out early in the movie if I'm living in The Conjuring. I know it's possible my wife is messing with and gaslighting me, but I really don't have any reason to think that's it. We get along great, we're happy, life is fairly stress-free considering there's no real reason for that to be happening. In any case, if that's it, the camera will stop it unless or until they can find another thing to mess with that's not being monitored. Then I'll monitor that, and so on.
You are listening to the content of ParanormalM.com.
A dream that didn't feel like a dream. This happened about 1.5 years ago, and I still think about it constantly. For context, we had to put my dog down in December 2020. I wasn't too broken up about it. I was sad, but I knew it was coming, and I knew it was the best option for her. She was old and in pain. I also had chronic nightmares since elementary, but they stopped around late 2018 when I went on to medication. With that said, I was mostly fine about it until the next year. I can't remember exactly when I had this dream, but I think it was somewhere around September 2021. The dream started off normal. I was walking through the woods behind my house, like I always used to do back then. I took the usual route toward a rope swing I like to go to, but stopped about 2/5 of the way there when I saw an extra trail that I didn't remember being there. It was small and beaten down, like someone had just walked through the plants and grass instead of actually clearing it. I got curious and turned to walk down the trail. I walked maybe 6 feet before stopping. The trail was only about 20 feet long, and at the end of it was my dog. She was covered in mud, and her fur was matted. She almost looked bloody, but it was hard to tell with all the dirt mixed in. It looked like she had been buried or something, which didn't make sense, because she was cremated. The most disturbing part was the fact that she was just standing, though. She didn't even acknowledge me when I walked up, nor did she seem to notice anything else. It was like she wasn't even conscious, but she was. I panicked and sprinted back to my house, walked in my back door and into the kitchen. The room with our back door and our kitchen are connected with an open doorway. I was standing there trying to figure out what to do when I turned around to see my dog walking through the open back door and into the kitchen with me. Again, she didn't look like she was conscious. No thought behind anything. If my dream had ended there, I would have thought it was just a nightmare. But then my mom walked into the living room and saw me, then looked down to see my dog, just standing there. She seemed shocked and terrified. I asked her what was going on, and she looked at me, still terrified. I'll never forget the way she said the words. This wasn't supposed to happen. I genuinely don't know how to say this without seeming like I'm playing it up or something, but this dream just didn't feel like a dream. Like I said in the context, I used to have chronic nightmares and really disturbing ones too. I know what they feel like. This did not feel like those nightmares. This felt like something I wasn't supposed to see. It felt like those experiences people talk about, where their dead pets visit them in their dreams and reunite with their owners. But wrong. It was just all wrong. Again, I can't describe to you the feeling I had and still have from this. I truly believe this wasn't a dream. I'm not sure what it was, but it wasn't a dream.
You are listening to the content of ParanormalM.com.
3 a.m., pipe smoke, and other misadventures. Afternoon all, I've been wanting to share some odd happenings that I've experienced for a while, and this sub seemed like a perfect place to do it. Around a year ago or so, I was in the toilet, going about my business at around 3 to 3:30 in the morning, when a weird smell filled the room. It smelt like old wool, smoke, and had some kind of sweet tinge to it, if that makes sense. It lasted about 20 seconds or so, and then went away. The next morning, I told my mom about my experience. She had been telling me stories of how she had smelled phantom pipe smoke from time to time for years now, and had wondered what I smelt was pipe smoke too. After describing the odor that I'd caught a whiff of to her, she confirmed my suspicions. Now for the interesting bit. My mom thinks that the pipe smoke might have belonged to my great-grandpa. He always used to smoke from a pipe. Sadly, I never got to meet him, as he passed away decades before I was born. There could be a rational explanation to this. Perhaps the previous owner of the house smoked a pipe as well, and left some residue from the smoke in the walls or something. I had my experience, however. I'd been living in this house for around 9 years, and I'd never smelled anything like it before. A few months after this first encounter, it actually happened again. I was in the bathroom at an ungodly hour and caught a whiff of smoke again, although this time it was only for a split second. I haven't smelt it since, however, but my mom continues to smell it quite often. Her last experience was only a couple of weeks ago. Now, I'm aware that this might not be the most exciting story on this sub, but this event has really stuck with me and is the only proper paranormal experience I've had. Thanks for reading this ramble. Have a good one.
You are listening to the content of ParanormalM.com.
Experience I've had at 7, and then again at 20. I'm now 36. I'm married. I live in another state. We've been together for 10 years, and I've had a dog for 9 of those 10 years. When this last experience happened to me, I was around 19 or 20 years old and living with my parents. It was our second house, and we had lived in as a family. It was only a few years after we moved in that I experienced this. I'm not religious or somebody who believes in afterlife, but also I acknowledge phenomenon that we can't explain, an energy that surrounds us. The first time I remember experiencing anything strange or paranormal, I was about 7 years old. At the time, I had really bad asthma, so we thought it actually turned out to be mold or asbestos in the school I was at. I was on a bunch of medications as I stopped breathing a few times from my condition. Since leaving that school, I was never diagnosed with asthma or on any medication whatsoever. Our first house was my parents' first house they purchased when I was born. They bought it from a couple who was going through a divorce. It was a 1-level, and my bedroom was diagonal across from my parents' room. All of a sudden, one night after my mom would put me to bed, She would leave my door slightly open so I was able to see in the hall and my parents' bedroom. I would be laying in the bed looking into their room, and within moments the pitch black room would start changing to all different colors rapidly. And then they would settle, and from it the figure or outline of a man in all black. I couldn't see facial features or clothes. I just knew it was a man in all black would form from these colors and start slowly walking toward the threshold of my room. The first time this happened, I freaked out and was screaming for my parents. They would come and nothing would be there. This went on for about a year. The most I ever watched was one time. I didn't look away as the figure actually stepped into my room, but then got so scared I would go under the covers and face my wall. I slept like that for a year until my mom took me to some woman I don't know if she was a medium or psychologist, or she just had me draw the figure on a piece of paper in jail and put in a shoebox in my room and keep it there. Shortly after being out of that school and doing that, all of these things stopped happening to me, and I ended up being in that room and house another 7 years until we moved. Never had another experience after that I had even really thought about that year again, my whole life growing up until I was 19 again. We had just recently moved to another home, once again, bought from a couple who had divorced. This house always had a cold, weird feeling to it. So one night I was out with my friends just getting food. We weren't drinking or anything of that nature, just a low-key night. I remember I came home around 10 p.m. and went upstairs to my bedroom. My room was on the second floor, and in the middle of the floor, my siblings' rooms were on either side of mine, and the master bathroom and bedroom at the end of the hall. I remember I came home, played some video games for a bit, and then shut the lights off and laid down to go to sleep. It was a tiny room and my bed was parallel to the door. I remember I fell asleep, fast and hard. I don't remember the time or why even, but eventually I wake up facing the door. Slowly my eyes are adjusting to the darkness and I see a figure standing in front of my closed door. I rub my eyes some more and see a tall black figure in what I can only describe as generic striped prison clothes. Standing there, I instantly shot up in the bed and go to scream. And all in that split second, the figure rushed toward me, put its hands around my throat, and choked me. I can't scream, can't make a sound. I instantly wake up. And I'm laying in the bed facing the door, and the room is completely empty. At this point, I'm kind of shook up. I go down the hall to the bathroom to splash water on my face, and I notice a handprint around my throat that does not match to mine. I don't know what to believe or think at this point. It was strange because I was shaken up, but not enough that kept me up all night. I didn't know what just happened or how to explain it, but I told myself it was just a bad dream. I went back to my room and went back to sleep. I never told anyone this before, and nothing like this has ever happened to me since then. I've moved a bunch of times in my life. I collect antiques and vintage items. I love horror films and anything paranormal or ghost hunting related, and still don't practice any spiritual or religious beliefs. I've been lurking on this sub for years and others about ghosts and paranormal. Reading other people's stories and learning more and more about paranormal, it's something that has always interested me. I don't consider myself somebody who spooks easily. I've felt that at this point in my life, I would like to share these experiences on here and hear what people have to say or their opinions on what all that could have been. To this day, I personally never have come to a conclusion on what all that was. I always chalked up what happened to me when I was 7 was a combination of medicines I was taking and the mold, asbestos I was inhaling while in that school. And then the event later in life, I ruled out as sleep paralysis.
You are listening to the content of ParanormalM.com.